Okay, here we go. Hi everybody, my name's Gary A. I'm an addict visiting from London. I got a lot of people to thank. I want to thank God for allowing me to do this. By the time we get through these thank yous, maybe everybody will be back in the room. But there's a few people to thank. I want to thank the committee. I particularly want to thank Caleb for asking me to come down here and do this. I want to thank my friend Paul, who came with me from London and accompanied me all the way down here. I want to thank my sponsor, who's celebrating 32 years clean today. I want to thank all my friends, all my teachers along the way. I want to thank Narcotics Anonymous. And I want to thank South Africa. The people here have made us feel really welcome. We've had a great time here since I've been here. You know, and isn't that great to be welcome somewhere? You know, that's my memory of Narcotics Anonymous, my first meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. There's two things I remember. One is that people told me to keep coming back. And the other one was that it was the first place I felt welcome in a long time. You know, and it's great to be here, and I'm here as a result of consistent and persistent application of this program, and there's been a lot of great speakers this weekend. I've heard people, get up here sharing their experience. I really enjoyed Friday night, and I could feel the power in the room on Friday night. I could feel anybody that's an atheist or an agnostic in the room, if you're in that room on Friday night, it's like, you could almost touch it, and we're talking about spiritual awakenings, and I came out of here and I was inspired. I was in spirit. Inspired. I felt great. But, here's my story. This is the first time I spoke outside of the UK, I've spoke at meetings, but it's the first time I've spoken at a convention outside of the UK. And, it's nice to be invited here, my clean date is September 13th, 1993. And at the time I got clean, in the place I got clean, Narcotics Anonymous was still very young in England, and we were out with two guys last night and they were saying, wow, it must be great to be in a fellowship where there's all that experience around you, and I turned to them and I said, you guys are living in the good bit. This is the good bit right now, because what's happening right here, what I'm witnessing is NA history. People in South Africa are pioneering NA in South Africa, starting new meetings. I got clean in a place where there was one meeting of Narcotics Anonymous a week. And the next place that had a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous was 30 miles away. And they had one meeting a week. And in that meeting there was one person who had over 1 year clean. And we thought she was like the local guru. Do you know what I mean? She had all the answers, and then she stopped coming, and there was nobody with over a year clean, in that area, and so, it was pretty sparse. It was pretty sparse. And, and I came from a very chaotic place. I was a chronic drug addict. But it didn't start out that way. It didn't start out that way, and the way I'll tell you how it started out. I was about 14, 15 years old. We used to hang out in a pool hall, and I didn't, and I had a little gang of friends, and I can't pin my addiction on my childhood. People say I was born an addict, and I always felt different, and I don't have firm memories of it. I grew up in an environment where nobody talked about how they felt anyway. So I had no idea whether I felt different than anybody else or whatever. But my memories of it were that, I would look at other kids and they appeared outwardly more confident than I felt inwardly. And I felt slightly intimidated by them, and we used to go in this pool hall and, and there'd be other kids and I was kind of intimidated and, and I would gaze across the pool hall at the girls at the other side of the pool hall, the untouchables. And And I would gaze across at them and I would try and figure out some chat-up line that I was going to kind of go over and try and drop on them. And something inside me would say, you go over and say that and you're going to get a blank expression, And I'd hear kids telling jokes and I'd find a joke funny and I'd want to recount the joke to another group of kids and something in me would go, it was like a lack of spontaneity. Don't tell that joke. They won't find it funny. And then one night, I was about 14 years old, 15 years old, I don't know, and we got this bottle of cider, and there's probably 3 of us on this bottle of cider, and we went round the back of the garages, and we shared this bottle of cider, and I went back into the pool hall, and I could tell the joke, and it didn't matter if they didn't laugh, and I went straight over to the Untouchables and sat at the side of them, and I started chatting to her, and I was chatting to her friends, and the guy who I was intimidated by, I'll fight you, and I'll fight your friend while I'm at it, and it did something for me that I couldn't get on my own. But, I went back to school on a Monday and I was all right. I wasn't dogged by an obsession or a compulsion or a craving. I just went back to school and the next weekend we did it again. I do remember I had a fascination with drugs from quite an early age. And I remember in the 80s in England they had a heroin campaign which was designed to scare you away from the horrors of heroin. And I used to look at the posters and think the guy on the poster looked pretty cool. And I remember taking the poster off the doctor's surgery wall and taking it home and putting it on my bedroom wall. Do you know what I mean? So, I was displaying some slightly abnormal tendencies, before I found, illegal drugs. But when I did find illegal drugs, I didn't have to be asked twice, And I grew up in a very working class environment. My father worked in a factory for 50 years before he retired. He had 2 years out for national service. My mum worked on the markets. I had one brother. He's not an addict. He's 4 years older than me. We grew up, I grew up in a small terraced house in a very working class environment, and it was, the best way I can describe it was, when I got into my teenage years, it was like growing up on red alert, and I looked at the kids around me, and I kind of created this persona for myself, because I'm a failed rebel. Do you know what I mean? And I looked at these older guys and I thought, I'll take a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of that, and I kind of created this persona for myself. I lived a pretense, and in order to survive in that environment, and we were pretty cruel. And if a kid was getting a hard time, I would join in, because if he's getting a hard time, I'm not getting a hard time. Do you know what I mean? And drugs came along and I started using them, and I wanted to be accepted, and I wanted to fit in with the older guys. And at some point, I can't tell you when it was, but at some point in my addiction, I crossed an invisible line. And from there on in, it changed. It wasn't something I was doing for fun, it was something I was doing out of necessity. And life is lived forwards, but is understood backwards. A lot of stuff I'm going to share with you now, I didn't know was happening at the time it was happening. But I know it now through the stuff that I've learned by coming here, looking into this literature, getting a sponsor, turning up to meetings regularly. I've learned some stuff around here, and I started to find, and what started to happen to me was, I didn't know this at the time, but, this disease, it had taken over my mind and it had taken over my body, and it says in the basic text, we know the 2 things that make up true addiction, obsession and compulsion. And I had an obsession, it was one thought that overrode all others, getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. And I had tunnel vision, and I couldn't see past that. And I couldn't see what I was doing to the people around me. And I remember my auntie coming up to me on a bus station one day when I was out shoplifting and sticking her finger in my chest and saying, "What are you doing to your father? He's lost 2 stone in weight." And I had genuinely had no idea what she was talking about. I lived in the same house as the guy. I didn't even notice because I was completely obsessed. But, obsession is only half of the story, because I get obsessed clean with stuff. I'm either obsessed or I'm not interested, and there's not much in between the two, the double whammy of addiction for me was, aside from being obsessed, I had this physical compulsion. I was compelled to use. It was a physical thing, you know, and it's like if you were to lock me in a police cell and leave me in there for 5 days and don't give me any food and water, and then let me out of there and put a Sunday roast in front of me, you're going to have to fight me to keep me away from that Sunday roast, because I'll be craving food. That's how I was at the end of my addiction. Like it says in our basic text, I was reduced to an animal level. You know, and I didn't care about the consequences. And what happened was, you know, it had taken over my mind, it took over my body, and I was compelled to use. And the worst thing about the using was, the more I used, the more I craved. You know, in my addiction, never once in my addiction was I using and thought to myself, you know what, I feel just right now. I'm going to seal this bag of heroin, put it in the drawer till tomorrow because I feel perfect. I've got it just right. I got it just right. Never once did that happen. So if any of you are sitting in here today and you're thinking about using, try to remember that. It doesn't do the trick. It doesn't work. It doesn't do the trick. It's a constant chase. It's a constant chase, you know, So, you know, I had this craving and this obsession, and what it did, it cut me off from my spirit. Because people say, you know, oh, when I was using, I had no conscience. I'll tell you what, in my using, my problem was I had too much conscience. I knew the difference between right and wrong. I knew when I was doing that stuff. I knew when I was robbing when I was in my mother's handbag, going through her purse. I knew that wasn't right, what I was doing. But the obsession was driving me on, and the craving was driving me on, and I had no option. I had no choice. I was powerless. You can't be responsible and powerless at the same time. If anybody out there is beating themselves up still about stuff they were doing out there, you can't be responsible and powerless at the same time. There's something more powerful than me, and it was driving me on. And my spirit, the voice of my conscience, which comes from about 3 inches behind my belly button, I would have these moments of clarity, and it would say, what are you doing? How have you ended up like this? Your life wasn't supposed to be like this. You're not like these people. And I go, ugh, get rid of that. Use. And, you know, and that obsession was just driving me on. And what started to happen in the progression of my addiction, that voice of my conscience started to become more and more frequent. And, you know, when I got clean, I remember being in this treatment facility, and they said, yeah, and the drugs stopped working. I said, drugs stopped working? If I was sick and I got a bag, I'd straighten me out. You know, but what I understand that to mean now was that as my addiction progressed, the voice of my conscience became louder and more frequent, and it got harder and harder to deny the reality of my life. And I hated myself. And I had 2.5 years trying to get clean with what I call a misguided desire to stop using. Because at the time I was using, the place I was using, there was no Narcotics Anonymous. There was no message. There were no examples sitting around to prove that it might be possible to live your life without having to use. And I believed all the myths. I believed once a junkie, always a junkie. I believed that stuff. And I would see people and they say, yeah, I'm getting clean, I'm getting off it, you know. And I remember seeing one guy said, yeah, I've got myself on the methadone, and I got myself a new girlfriend, and I got myself a job, and I hated him when he told me, you know. I thought, you know, because in my eyes he was clean, you know, where I was coming from, you know. And then about 2 weeks later, I'm round at some dealer's apartment, and there he is. Shh! Don't tell anyone you've seen me here. Don't tell anyone you've seen me here. So, of course, I go out and tell everyone I've seen him there, you know, and so, because I couldn't stand the fact that somebody might be able to get their lives together when I clearly couldn't. You know, and I was, like I say, I had 2.5 years with this desire, misguided desire to stop using. You know, I remember my brother called me up and you know, because we get into NA and you get the drug hierarchy, don't you? Well, I was a crack user. I was a heroin user, you know, not those marijuana users. Like, this kind of like, you know, addict superiority nonsense. Well, I'm just going to destroy any myths about that right now, because I'll tell you what happened to me, yeah? My brother calls up, he says, Mum can't sleep at night, Dad's losing weight. My brother's 6'4", by the way. You're coming on holiday with me. And I was like, we're going to get you off that stuff once and for all. I was like, oh, okay, well, I could do with a holiday, you know, maybe, you know, work on my tan a bit, you know, and kind of get this stuff out of my system. And okay, I'll come on holiday, I'll do that. So he rings back the next day, he says, I booked it. We're going on a skiing trip. I was like, a skiing trip to detox from heroin, like, and I haven't ever skied, do you know what I mean? And I'm not very good at detoxing either, do you know what I mean? So we go on the skiing holiday. We're on the skiing holiday, and I take a bottle of juice with me, you know, some of the methadone, and I'm there, and I'm a disaster. Do you know what I mean? And I found this local bar. We were in Colorado in the US, and we found this local bar, and they used to brew their own beer. So every night I used to go in there and drink as much as I could possibly drink. And then I met these like Grateful Dead fans, these like American hippies, and I bought a big bag of weed from them, and I used to keep that at the hotel room and drink, back to the hotel room, roll up a big spliff, take a few talks on the spliff, hang on to the sides of the chair, close my eyes, feel like I'm falling down a cliff over and over again, like I'm going to be sick. Do you know what I mean? But you know, this was the detox. You know, this was the recovery, and what happened was we got to the airport to fly back to Manchester, and we're in the airport, and I say, duty free. I go in duty free, I get a bottle of Jack Daniels. I don't even like the taste of it, but it looks pretty rock and roll, so I buy a bottle of that, and we fly back to Manchester, and I wake up early the next morning, and I'm in my mum's house, and it's about 9 a.m, and I'm clean. And I'm like, so what am I going to do today? So, okay, I better, I see the Jack Daniels on the side. I better go get a beaker to fill this to get some of this Jack Daniels. So I go down into the kitchen. Hi, Mum, I'm just going to get a beaker. And my mum, she's got eyes in the back of her head by now, you know. And her ears are super tuned, you know, because I used to try and like rip tinfoil quietly. You know that one? And so she's looking out for me. I'm just getting a beaker, Mum. Okay, fine. So I go upstairs and I fill this beaker of Jack Daniels, and I start throwing this stuff down my neck, and it's burning my throat, and I don't even like the taste of it, and it's turning my stomach, and I'm like, I finish this beaker of Jack Daniels, and I go, now I'm going to work out my plan for recovery. Stay away from all them scuzzy, junky criminals and start hanging out in the local pub with all the local hooligans. That's what I'll do. And that's what I did. And the next 6 months, if you saw me in the street, I always had a tin of Carlsberg Special Brew or Tennant Super Strength, you know. And I mean, social drinkers don't drink that stuff, by the way. You know, it's an acquired taste. And you know, and I used to drink this stuff called White Ways Damson wine, which was like 14%, and it was like £3.50, but it kind of got you warmed up for the day. And then I would eat Valiums, and I would eat Ativans, and I would eat temazepam, and I would shoot Diconol, and I would shoot amphetamine so I can drink more booze, and I would sniff coke, and I would pop ecstasy, and I would drop hallucinogenics, which I couldn't stand, by the way, and you know, and I'm going in the pub, and I'm offering guys out for fights who are twice my size, you know, and I'm getting beaten up, and I'm kind of trying to push people through shop windows, and I'm blacking out, and I'm waking up in police cells, and all the guys in the pub are going, you keep it up, Gaz, you're doing great, you stay off that shit. So just for the record, this is not about heroin, yeah? It's not about crack, it's about addiction, yeah? You know, you know, and what happened was it got really hairy towards the end, and, you know, I remember, you know, because I'm trying to get clean. I'm powerless. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to get clean, and it just isn't working out. And I remember I'd OD'd. I woke up in some psychiatric unit, and there's tubes coming out of me, and, you know, and the nurses used to bring my food, and they used to bring my medication, and I thought, this is all right, you know. I just want to stay here a while, because when I step back out on the street, I know exactly what's going to happen. You know, I knew I was powerless before I got here. You know, and what happened was my mum, she got in touch with this organisation called Families Anonymous. It really ruined things for me. Do you know what I mean? They started telling her stuff like, don't believe anything he says, don't give him any money, don't let him treat your house like a hotel. I was like, who are these people? You know, and so I'm in this psychiatric unit, and my mum comes to see me, and she's heartbroken, and she's sat there, and I'm led in this bed, and, you know, anybody here been in a psychiatric unit? Yeah, okay, yeah, so, you know, because I'm in there, I'm thinking, these people are really mad. Do you know what I mean? It's like, people are slavering and talking to themselves, and they've got God complexes and all kinds of stuff in there, and, you know, I'm like, so and I said to my mum, please, just let me come back home. We'll beat this. We'll do it. We'll beat it as a family. We'll beat it. So my mum, she loves that stuff, you know. Okay then, son, we'll do it. Let's come home. So she texts me from the psychiatric hospital home, and I'm going to do the home detox, you know, and I'm in the car, and I'm already negotiating with her that I'm going to need some hash to help me sleep at night, you know, and so she texts me to buy some hash, you know, with her money, and we get home, and I get on the home detox, so I'm, you know, and I'm on the home detox, and I'm on the methadone, and I'm reducing the methadone really quickly, and every night I'm waking up, and the bed's full of sweat, and you know, and my mum's solution to everything is feed it. Yeah, it's like, if there's a problem, just feed it. So I come downstairs, and there'll be like big breakfast put in front of me, and I've got no appetite, and it's like, where I come from, it's like it is today, it just rains all the time, you know, and it's like I'm looking out the window, and it's raining, and I'm depressed, and I'm sick, and I'm like, oh, and I'm putting my dad's Frank Sinatra videos on to try and sort of stop me thinking about, you know, using, and you know, and I'm trying to get clean, but I really sincerely wanted to get clean this time, and I'm detoxing, and I'm sticking to my scripts, and after about I'm at home, and it's Friday, and I've stuck to my scripts all week, and I'm doing great, and it's the weekend, so I've been doing really well, and I've kept to my scripts all week, so I deserve a treat, because it's, you know, it's the weekend, so I'm going to have a Friday bag. What I'll do, I've got my feet back under the table here. I'll just have a Friday bag. Once a week, on a Friday, I'll have a bag. You know, and she's cooking for me. She'll wash my clothes. She'll wash my bedding, and you know, and I smoke a little bit of hash, and you know, I have my Friday bag. Well, this strange thing happened, because I did the bag on the Friday, and by the time, you know, Sunday came around, all I could think about was the following Friday, right? Monday comes around, and it's like, Friday. When's Friday coming? Tuesday, it's like, who slowed the clock down? You know, when's Friday coming? Friday. All I can think about is Friday, you know, and Wednesday, it's like Friday. Thursday comes, I'm that excited that it's going to be Friday the next day that I decide I can have my Friday bag a day early this week. So I do my Friday bag on a Thursday. And so I do my Friday bag, I sneak out, I get a bag, I use the bag, I get back home, I roll a spliff, I put the portable TV on in my room, and I go to bed, and I wake up the next morning, I open my eyes, what day is it? It's Friday, I've got to have a Friday bag, because it's a Friday, isn't it? You know, it's a Friday, you can't, it's a you know, I can't. So I go and get another one. So, you know, it's like, and all of a sudden I've done another one, and I wake up the next day, and my home detox, it isn't covering me. And I'm still a bit sick, and I can't go, and it's like, what just happened there? I said I was only going to do it once a week, I've done it twice a week now, and the next day I wake up, and it's, you know, and it's Sunday, and it's raining outside, and I'm depressed, and I'm sick, and I've not slept properly all night, and my mum and dad are sat watching the TV, and I'm just like, if this is life after drugs, you can keep it, you know, and I'm out there and I'm using full blown. And, you know, and it got horrendous, you know. We talk about our lives becoming unmanageable. My life became unbearable. I couldn't stand myself. I couldn't stand the life I was living. And what happened was, you know, that voice of my conscience, it was speaking, and it was just ruining things for me. You know, it was saying, you know, you can't go on like this. You just can't go on like this. And what happened was I hit bottom. And when I hit bottom, I was on my knees screaming out to a God that I didn't even believe in. Help me. I can't do it anymore. I can't have it anymore. I'm sick of waking up every morning wishing, you know, I used to wake up and my eyes would open and I think, oh no, not again. I don't want to have to do this again. Where am I going to start now? Where am I going to get my money from? What am I going to do? I don't want to have to go out. I'm sick and tired. I can't do this. You know, I hear people and they get, you know, they stick around a little bit in NA and they get a bit complacent. Oh man, I need a day off my recovery. It's like, I felt like I needed a day off every day at the end of my using. You know, and it was nailing me. It was nailing me. And I asked him for help. And within 24 hours, through a series of bizarre circumstances, coincidences, synchronicity, call it what you will, I end up 30 miles up the road in a 12-step treatment facility, and they had the steps and the traditions on the wall, and it might as well have been written in Egyptian for what I thought for how much I thought it applied to me. You know, and I detoxed, and I went to a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. And they told me to keep coming back, and I've been coming back ever since. You know, and aside from an addiction problem, I had a hearing problem. You know, because we read these cards at the beginning of the meeting. You guys do that in your meetings? You read the cards, yeah? there's one of those cards, and it's got this little thing on it, and, I was about 11 years clean sitting in a meeting, and someone read the card, and they said, we've learned from our group experience that those who keep coming to our meetings regularly stay clean. I went, what? I never heard that before. Run that by me again. Anyone got any problem? You're all following that one, aren't you? We've learned from our group experience, so it's from our experience, it's not a theory. Those who keep coming regularly stay clean. And then you get the kind of, well, what do you call regularly then? You always get those people, like, I'll tell you what regularly is. Regularly is as often as my sponsor goes, My sponsor tells me, you go minimum 4 meetings a week. And that's what I do, because why wouldn't I? Where else am I going to be? What else am I going to be doing? I'll tell you something now, right? I was in South Africa 2 months ago, and I'm going to blow my own trumpet a little bit here, yeah? I came down here for the World Cup final. We had some of the best seats in the house. I had to bring a famous English rock star down to South Africa to the World Cup final. I'm not winding you up here. This happened. And what happened was, we flew down here. We had a chauffeur 24 hours a day with security. We stayed in a 5-star hotel. We had the best seats in the house, and it was a fun experience. But I'll tell you what, it didn't make me feel like Friday night. It made me feel in here. Try explaining that to somebody who isn't in recovery. Try explaining that to them. What we do here is so important. And what you guys are doing here in South Africa is so important. We have a responsibility. When we find this, we have a responsibility to try and give it away to as many people as we could. And when I got clean in a place, like I said, there was 1 meeting a week. We didn't know what we were doing. But what we did know was we need to tell as many people about this as we possibly can and get them in here with us. We didn't know what we were doing. It wasn't a case of sitting there stroking your chin going, who looks serene in here, who I might kind of get for a sponsor. It was clinging onto each other for dear life. And one thing I've learned is every person, I've sponsored a few people in the time I've been clean, every person that I've sponsored that's gone back out the door, the one thing they've all got in common, one thing common to them all, has been a lack of honesty. One thing I learned in Narcotics Anonymous is to be authentic. If it's good, I'll tell you it's good. And if it's not, I'll tell you it's not. But I ain't using through it. I ain't going using through it. And, my recovery is in a constant state of reassessment and reevaluation. There's a bit in this basic text here where it talks about everything we know is subject to revision, especially what we know about the truth. My ego needs to be right. It needs to be right. It has an opinion on everything. It has an opinion on things it doesn't even have any information about. And my ego, when I arrived in Narcotics Anonymous, my ego had been deflated to such a point where I could hear what people were saying. Because when I was out there using, people say, you need to stop with that stuff, it's going to kill you. And I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Slow down, will you? Yeah, whatever. And when I got here, it's like, I could hear what people were saying. And that ego is doing everything it can to rebuild. And the longer we stay clean, the more it's trying to rebuild. And my ego will use anything against me. It'll use the fruits of my recovery against me. It'll use my career and my home and all this good stuff that I've accrued as a result of coming here regularly. It'll use that against me. It'll use my clean time against me to try and make me different than you, try and make me superior to you. It's a very dangerous place to be when you're the guy in the fellowship who's got the most time. Do you know what I mean? Because you start thinking like, you got all the answers here. And it's so I have to be careful. It'll try and use my clean time against me. It tries to use the information that I learn in these books here. These books. Anybody read these books? It's a good idea. There's two Narcotics Anonymous. There's a fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous, and there's a program of Narcotics Anonymous, and the program's in these books. It tries to use the information. It tries to use the spiritual principles of the program against me. It tries to tell me I'm special and spiritual. And then something happens, and I'm reminded that I'm not. And what happened was, I stuck around and I stayed clean and I came to meetings regularly, and I was about 9 years clean, and You know, I had my first rock bottom clean about 18 months, 18 months clean. Because what had happened was, they told me, get yourself a sponsor. Find the person who's got what you want. Right? I'm 6 months clean in Blackpool. And there's this guy rolls into town, and he was from the East End of London. He was what we call in England a wide boy, or what the Americans would call a wise guy. He basically turned up, and he was a used car dealer, and he would every meeting he would arrive in a different car. Every weekend he was out with a different woman. He always had a wad of cash with a big rubber band around it, and he said he was 4 years clean. And they said, look for the person who's got what you want. And I thought, well, that's what I want. I don't want to be like drinking herbal tea and talking about God. Do you know what I mean? That's what I want. Because that was what I related to, And so I said, would you be my sponsor? He said, yeah, I'll be your sponsor. So yeah, I've got a sponsor now. This is working out good. I got 6 months clean. I got a sponsor. I've got myself a commitment. I'm in the game, So he says, come round. We'll have a sponsor meal. So I used to listen to a lot of tapes, it was tapes back then, it's CDs now, but it was these American speakers, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is like what they talk about on the tapes, going to my sponsors for a meal. So I get round to his house for a meal, and he's got this big frying pan with 2 steaks in it, and as he's frying the steaks, he's pouring Carlsberg Special Brew on the steaks. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, and I said to him, I don't know much about this, but I know that's not right what you're doing there, and he said, don't worry, the alcohol boils off, and it's like, I'm not eating that, and it's a funny story, but the sad thing about the story is, I was at the London convention this year, and we have a mutual friend, and he had a picture on his iPhone of this guy, because he saw him earlier this year, and he's now in his late 50s, he hasn't got a tooth left in his head. He's out selling heroin for some 18-year-old kids on the streets in Portsmouth. He's been through 3 treatment centres. He's done 3 jail sentences. Never got the message. Never got the message. A simple message. Be honest. Turn up. Try and help others. Don't use. Anybody in here had a day where they felt like using? Yeah, we all have those days, but we don't do it. We get ourselves in here. Because there's one way to work this program the wrong way, and that's to work it on your own. Every step of this program starts with a word other than the 12th step, and that's we, which implies it needs more than one of us. So I'm over 9 years clean, and it's not working out with my sponsor. I was in Los Angeles. I was there on business, and I got the phone number of a guy who I'd heard on tape, and I wanted to get this guy as my sponsor, and I called him up, and he said, yeah, we'll meet at a meeting. So I met him at this lunchtime meeting. And we go for food after, and I'm getting myself ready to ask him to sponsor me. And this guy, he's sitting there, and I said, I'm interested in sponsorship, and it's not working out with my sponsor. And he says, so how long are you clean? I said, over 9 years. He says, that's good. He says, so do you do service? I said, of course I do service. Hospitals and institutions. I'm in the prisons. I'm in the detoxes. I'm a group service. I've been to AS. Of course. Service. Pretty good. You been through the program? I've worked through the steps twice. Sponsor people? I've got sponsees. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking he should be happy that I'm asking him. Do you know what I mean? And I'm doing this guy a favour. Do you know what I mean? And so he says to me, he says that's pretty good. So he said, so what's powerlessness mean? I said, oh, that's easy, isn't it? When I take the first one, I can't stop. He said, no, that's the result of being powerless. What's powerlessness mean? So I went, well, when I take the first one, it sets off a mental obsession coupled with a physical compulsion and don't try working the literature on me. What does powerless mean? So I'm sitting there and I can feel myself blushing, and I'm thinking, and he's like, you're the guy with the sponsees and and you've been through the steps twice, you've got all the answers. What's powerless mean? And I'm starting to feel really stupid, and I looked at the door of the restaurant and I thought, this guy's in his 60s, I could be out of here in a shot, and he'll never see me again, so I'm begging, I'm like, oh, you tell me? He's like, no, you're the guy with the answers, you tell me? I'm like, oh, come on, give me a break, please tell me, what's powerless mean? He went, Gary, powerless is a lack of power. I knew that. He went, oh, you knew that, did you? He went, well, if you knew that, Why don't you tell me that? If you can't tell me that, how are you going to explain this to a new guy? So I sit back and I take a big sigh of relief, and then, and I'm just about to tuck into my food, and he says, so where are you getting your power from? What? Where are you getting your power from? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're over 9 years clean. He said, you know, you're getting your power from somewhere. If you're a powerless addict, where are you getting your power from? And I'm just like, oh my God, what's he doing? You know, it's like, I'm like, God, higher power, and I'm getting all tongue-tied. And he said, Gary, the power that we have here comes from this fellowship coupled with this program. Oh, okay, I can get that. Because, I got clean in a treatment centre, and I don't know if any of you experienced this. The treatment centre I was in, everyone used to walk around like clockwork parrots going, I've got a choice today, 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 including the counsellors. I've got a choice today. And guess what? Most of them went and used again. They had a choice, but they went and used. So I needed to get to grips and start to understand what gives me the ability to choose. My friend Mike, he relapsed after 6 years. He went out for 2 years, and he never used his drug of choice once during his relapse, but rock bottomed harder than he ever rock bottomed before. And he basically, he came back to meetings, and he said one of the most profound things I've ever heard anyone say in an NA meeting. He said, the decision whether I use or not is not based in what I think, it's based in what I do. If our problem centres in our thinking, don't go to the source of your problem for advice on your problem. So, I had to go back to the very beginning. Our basic text, it talks on page 52. It said, it talks about fully conceding. It talks about when we fully concede to our innermost self, at the core of our being, when we fully concede to our innermost self that we are powerless over our addiction, this is a big step in recovery. Not just a big step, it's a crucial step. It's an essential step. So I love being part of this. I, in and of myself, don't have the power. I need the power that comes when we get together. 2 of us together is a power greater than me on my own. 2 of us get together with a shared purpose of recovery, being honest. It creates a power that's greater than me, that I can depend on to stay clean. And our second step talks about could be restored to sanity. To use again would be insanity for me. So not using is sanity. But then that third step decision. Oh, and what a big decision that is. I had to come to realize in recovery that, because people, that any area of my life that I try and run on my will becomes unmanageable. The first part of the first step talks about our powerlessness, but as time's gone on, I understand more the significance and importance of unmanageability. I couldn't manage my own life. I can't manage my own life out there using, and I can't manage it clean either. I need some guidance. And so that third step decision, it talks about, making that decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And I'll tell you something about that. I have another tool in my recovery other than these books, and it's called a dictionary. Yeah? I wasn't paying attention that much in English at school. So if you ain't got a dictionary, try and get yourself one. And when you read this stuff, get the dictionary and check out what things mean. I looked up the word will. And it says, you employing our mental faculties to make a choice. So if I'm in self-will, I'm employing my mental faculties to make a choice that's based on serving self. And if I'm in God's will, I'm employing my mental faculties to make a choice that's based on serving God. And just how do I do that? Because in early recovery, I used to be kind of, I'd be washing over. I'm in God's will. I'm in my will. Whose will am I in? I didn't know what I was doing, and it's like, for me, God's will is to be of love and service and try and help His kids. And I don't get caught up in all that stuff about, categorizing His kids. Our basic text tells us we're grateful to the AA fellowship for showing us this way of life. And I'm grateful to them. I went to some of those meetings when I first came around. They suffered me. I'll tell you, they suffered me, the people in those meetings. But I do my service in Narcotics Anonymous. Because this is the place I can be of maximum service to God and others. And I came in here, I felt like an old man. 2 weeks before my 24th birthday. I'm a 41-year-old man now. You know, and the stuff that's happened, you know, the 4th step. What an incredible, you know, I thought this was some kind of like confession of my sins. And my understanding through working this program has changed as time has gone on. You know, I was full of resentment and full of fear. And I'm still prone to that, by the way. You know, because my default setting is one of being self-centered fear. And I had to get straight with my resentments, I had to get straight with my fears, and I had to get straight with my sex conduct. And I'll tell you something. Every resentment that I suffer from comes from the past. And every fear comes from the future. And if I'm in resentment, or I'm in fear, or I'm in both, it's not possible to be in the now. And the now is where I need to be to have conscious contact with God. Right here, right now. FEAR. Forgetting everything's all right. Right here, right now, in this moment, everything is all right. I got a belly full of porridge. I got friends around me. You know, I got a roof over my head. You know, I forgot that on the thank yous, actually. You know, thanks for the people that have been putting us up and feeding us while we've been here up at the big house on the hill, if you know where I mean. And the clients have made us super welcome too. You know, I got to be in the now. So I got to, you know, and I'm so prone to those resentments. And then I started to learn, you know, as time went on that, you know, that I had a part in these resentments. Because, you know, I was really good at getting to the exact nature of their wrongs. But not at getting to the exact nature of our wrongs, of my wrongs, you know, and I started to see that to get free of resentment, you know, I need to be able to put myself in the other person's shoes. I need to walk in their shoes. You know, I need to try and take their inventory, if you will. Look at their background experiences. Look at their fears. Look at their insecurities. And think, you know, if I had their background, if I had their fears, if I had their insecurities, could I do what I think they're doing to me? And invariably the answer is yes. And if I can't find that common ground, I ain't going to find any compassion. And if I can't find that compassion, I ain't going to find any forgiveness. And then the one that really sickened me to my stomach with my current sponsor, I said, listen, I do this step 10 inventory, and like there's people's names that come up again and again and again, and you know, like there's one particular woman in the fellowship, and you know, every time I walk into a meeting, I'd see her there, my heart would sink. I'd be like, oh no, she's here, you know, and like, you know, and I'd had a clash with this woman, and you know, as we do when we come here regularly, and you know, and my sponsor told me, he said, you know, I said, you know, a lot of these resentments I get free of, but some of them, they stay. And he said, you want to get free of a resentment? You want to truly get free of it? You got to go and make amends to the people you resent. Steady on. Do you know what I mean? I want to get well, but come on, let's. You know, and what happened to me in my last step 5, because we're talking about the 12 step. We talk about practicing these principles in all our affairs. Now, I come to these NA meetings and I try and be of love and service. I stick my hand out to newcomers. I give my telephone number. I try and help people. I sponsor people. You know, and I see people come in absolutely broken. And then 6 months later, they're sat there glowing. And I'd written them off. I thought, there's no chance of getting clean, that one. And then they're sitting there clean, and I go, wow, God, look at you performing these wacky miracles. And you know, and I see it happening in these meetings. And yet, what had happened was I would go to work, and I work in an office, and I would, when I would go into the office, I didn't even do it on a conscious level. I'd get to the office door, and I'd go, I've seen you, God, doing all those kind of wacky miracles in Narcotics Anonymous, but I've got a 3.5-year-old boy and a wife, and I've got to support those people. I've got to put food on the table and pay the bills. So I know you're all powerful, and I know you do those wacky miracles because I've witnessed it, but this bit, I'm going to look after. So I go into the office, you know, and like anybody in the office who you know, somebody gets a promotion, and I'm like, promotion? They don't deserve that. And you know, and I'm like, and I sit there and I think I should be running the entire company, and you know, it's time these people recognize my genius, and you know, and like, And I did a step 5, and pretty much everybody I worked with, and everybody who I thought was in a position of perceived power above me, they're all on the list. Resent the lot of them. You know, and I had to go and I had to start making amends to these people. I had to start, and, you know, because the thing is, I think I'm a bit of a maverick, you know, and I work inside, it's a corporation. But, you know, I'm not a corporate guy, you know, and I work in a corporate, but I'm not one of those corporate people, you know, and they'd have like team meetings. I sit there with my arms folded, rolling my eyes, do you know what I mean, like looking at the door, dying to get out of there. You know, and I had to go to people, I had to say, look, I've not been being a team player, and I regret the way that I've been, and you know, and I want to change that. You know, and I'd take people out for lunch and I'd ask people, how was your weekend? Even if I wasn't that interested. You know, just make that bit of effort, you know, and consequently things started to change there. It became a much nicer place to be, a much nicer environment. You know, and we talk in the 12 step, we talk about having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry this message to addicts. The word's tried to. Tried. Doesn't mean they're going to want it. You know, my experience is the majority of them don't. You know, and it talks in the basic text. It says most addicts resist recovery. You know, I go into the detox unit on a Wednesday night and it's pouring down in rain and the Champions League football's on and I'd much rather be at home with my feet up watching the football, and I go in there and they come walking in and trudging in and they're moaning about how they've not had a night's sleep. And, you know, my grand sponsor tells a story. He says, if you were to walk into a cancer ward and say, we've got a way to arrest your cancer, and not only can we arrest your cancer, you'll be better than you ever were before you got the cancer. Those people would crawl out of their beds and crawl on their hands and knees to find out what it was they needed to do. You walk into a detox unit, say, hey everybody, we've got a way to arrest your problem, and you'll be better than you ever were before you got the problem. How many meetings do I have to go to? You know, and that's, you know, and that was my experience. I walked into a treatment centre, the first thing that came out my mouth, how long is this going to take? Like I had some big life to get back to, do you know what I mean? It's like, and then I get to a meeting, how many of these do I have to go to? You know, and what I used to do early in recovery, I was always looking for ways to do less. Now in recovery, I'm always looking for ways to do more. Because the best experiences I have in my life come as a result of doing this. Coming from getting that connection. You know, recovery is about unity, conscious unity. Addiction's all about separation. You know, and my thinking will try and separate me. My ego will try and separate me. You know, and there's another bit I'm going to read here in the basic text where it talks about ego used to control us in all sorts of subtle ways. Used to? Ego still controls me in all sorts of subtle ways. Anger is our reaction to our present reality. Resentment's a reliving past experiences again and again. And fear is our response to the future. You know, I'm going to try and dispel a Narcotics Anonymous myth now. Because one of the things I hear in Narcotics Anonymous, people say, one promise in Narcotics Anonymous, freedom from active addiction. And I understand that, and it's great. But I think we undersell ourselves when we say that. I've had a lot more than freedom from active addiction. And people say, you know, oh, addicts don't like change. I don't like the changes that I don't like. You know, flying first class to the World Cup final and staying in a 5-star hotel with no obsession to use was a change. Do you know what I mean? I had no objection to it whatsoever. You know, but I'm going to read something to you, and it's one of these well-kept secrets that we have in Narcotics Anonymous, because if you want to keep a secret, put it in these books. You know. I was in a treatment facility, and one day I got this one down off the shelf, and I looked at it, I thought, doesn't look too interesting, there's no pictures in it, no cartoons, can't see any jokes, but and I saw this bit in the front, and I went, whoa, what's this? And it says, many books have been written about the nature of addiction. This book primarily concerns itself with the nature of recovery. If you're an addict and have found this book, please give yourself a break and read it. And I went, and put it back on the shelf. You know, I'm going to read you one of our well-kept secrets. These are the promises of Narcotics Anonymous. This green and gold book here, it works how and why. The end of step 11, it says, we see that regardless of the presence or absence of material success in our lives, we can be content. We can be happy and fulfilled with or without money, with or without a partner, Steady on with the money bit. With or without the approval of others. We've begun to see that God's will for us is the ability to live with dignity, to love ourselves and others, to laugh. I mean, because this is a serious business, but don't forget to have fun. And to find great joy and beauty in our surroundings. Our most heartfelt longings and dreams for our lives are coming true. These priceless gifts are no longer beyond our reach. They are, in fact, the very essence of God's will for us. I'm going to leave it there. God bless you all. Thank you.